So we'll do a little thread tracing on the center back. And this is going to be rather important because this is where your box pleat will go. And it's better not to handle that silk file too much because it's very frazzly. Ravels pretty easily, unravels. Okay, same on the lining. Now you can also do, if you don't want to have a contrasting color, you can also do this in black. Or any other color that goes with your decoration scheme. But I would keep it lightweight for this size hat. Like, always keep the lining in a taffeta if you can, because it'll get too thick and look bulky. Okay, thread tracing is done. So now that you have your thread tracing done, put your baboolay together, right sides together, and then pin it, matching your drawn lines. And you're first going to stitch only the bottom curve. Because you're going to decorate this with trim, and although this is a rather torturous way of doing this, I think it'll save your nerves in the long run, because you only need to catch the black file, and this will make sure that you don't, come on, slide there, that your stitches don't show through on the silk taffeta. This is causing me a lot of trouble. There. And I was cutting this out, I marked the back of the fabric before I drew it on there, so that I would know which is the wrong side of the fabric. So you can always do that when you have a fabric that has a definite back, right and wrong side, so that you don't make a mistake. Because this wrong side is a lot shinier, and I like the matte surface. Now this needs to be stitched, and I do it on the machine. And we're just going to stitch this curve first. See how much this is fraying. I want to pull threads. Okay, so now that we're pinned together on the bottom, there's a little rumple in there. I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew this bottom edge. Stitching has been done by machine. I used a very small stitch because I don't want this to unravel. And now we're going to trim to about like 1/4 of an inch. Now we're going to turn this right side out. Give this a little finger press. Okay. You're going to eventually turn this wrong sides out again to finish sewing it, but I'm doing this so that it's easier to attach the trim. And then I'm going to press this and we'll be right back. So this press down, and what we're going to do next is we're going to sew our trim, which is the silk taffeta that you'll have in your kit, and then over that we sew the black lace. But the trick is to get it only on the black. And you also want to try to keep the seam allowance on the inside away from your stitches. So we don't want it to go on here at all. We just want to continue on here. And you're just, tacking it a little because you have to put the black over it and you'll be stitching it down again. So, but make sure your stitches are hidden. You don't want a lot of pink showing on the black, the rose. And you can put this, I think I have this like 1/4 of an inch from the edge, which I think is a pretty good scale for the baboolay. It's a little bigger, but make sure that it's the same all the way along the curve. This top edge is already done. So, as you can see, I forgot to tell you, I did thread mark the outside edge of the baboolay so that you knew how far to sew. There's no reason to keep going since it's going to be cut off. Okay, so that's finished. And let me show you what I did with this. So in your kit, you will find a strip of silk tissue taffeta that's on one of the, I don't think it's on a winder. I think it's just in the package by itself. And what you'll do is you'll press down 1/4 of an inch on one side and then press up the other edge up into the crease. And then that'll fold over. And you want no bigger than 3/4 of an inch wide when you're finished. And the reason I do this is because this silk is so sheer that the black would show through a little bit otherwise. And I think it looks better if it's a deeper color, especially since you're putting the black lace on top of it. And then when you get finished with that, pressing that, then you're going to press a curve into it so that it fits the bottom of the baboolay. So let me show you how I do that. It's very easy. Okay, so we're going to press a curve. It's already got a curve, but let me show you how it works. So after you've pressed your initial creases into this, you're just going to pull the silk as you iron it, and it'll put a nice curve in it because it's bias. And then it'll be easier to stitch to the bottom of your baboolay. So our next step will be to put the black lace over the silk satin or silk taffeta. And I wanted to show you, you see how this is stitched. I haven't caught the seam allowance at all, which is good because you're gonna, eventually, we're gonna turn this back wrong side out and finish stitching this. So be really careful when you do that. It just makes it so much easier for you. Okay, then just gonna lay this on here. And I think one side is a little, well, they're pretty much the same. But one side, the ridges, the raised threads are a little more pronounced, so you might want to use that as your top. And then you're just going to pin this in place. That all the way down, and then with some black single thread waxed, and tack that, and once again only to the black file. And you also don't want your stitches to show through onto the pink. So be very careful. when you're stitching this down. There. Let's get rid of some of these strings. Okay. I'm going to sew this down and I'll be right back. Okay, so this has been stitched down, and careful not to show that your little stitches don't show on the pink. And then we're going to give it a steam press to set it in place. Okay, looks really nice. So the next thing to do is to turn it back, wrong side out. And then you're going to need to press this back open, this seam, right here at the corners, where you're going to have to finish sewing. Okay, on the other side. Now the heat erasable pen mark disappeared on this, so I don't know what was going on with the other stuff. So you now can remove their thread tracings from the edge, and using the marks that are on the I can still faintly see. We're going to pin this back, and from the center we're going to leave like 5 inches open. So mark that with a pin. This is so we have an easy job of turning it right side out again. Remove this stitching. Okay, now I'm going to do this on the machine. I'm going to sew up to this pin and leave this section open, and I'm going to do a fairly small stitch, and then when I get to the corners and this dog leg here, I'm going to use really small stitches. And again, when I get down to the peak down here, I'm going to integrate that stitching back into what we've already done on the curve at the bottom, and do that in very small stitches, because we're going to turn this out. And this fabric is very fragile, even though it seemed like a substantial, the silk file, it's very easy to poke through it. And the taffeta is very fragile. So we'll leave a section like this open to turn it. Okay, I'm gonna go stitch this. Be right back. Okay, I finished the machine stitching. You can see I've gone back over that next section that we had previously sewn, and now I'm going to trim this away. About 1/4 of an inch. So, okay, now we have to cut our peaks. Don't cut the threads. And you're going to cut into this little dog leg, not cutting the threads. And you're going to cut this peak off here. And the same over here. And then into this dog leg. Okay. There. Now we're going to turn it right sides out. I have my little point turner here. Carefully. I've sewn this with really tight stitches, so hopefully we're not going to poke through anywhere. I find sometimes if you kind of massage that point, you can get it to turn out a little easier. And we'll do the same over here. Let's see if we can get that a little better. Okay, I think that's the best we're going to do. And then you're going to fold this down. Make sure you keep matching up your center thread tracings. And before the file has raveled away completely, a good idea to pin this so it doesn't slide. You're going to tuck that under so it looks like this. And then we're going to slip stitch this closed. And I've used both black and pink thread. And I think that the pink works a little better for some reason. Seeing the black on the pink is more jarring, I think, than seeing the pink on the black. Okay, let me thread this up and I'll be right back. Okay, so we've got this rose taffeta turned in, and then we're going to slip stitch this closed. Make sure you hide your knots. And we don't want our stitches to show on the black. So we have to do this very carefully. Single wax thread for this. And I'm doing fairly small stitches. I think you should imagine what size stitch this would be if the doll-sized person was actually sewing this. It's much smaller than we could do, but it'll give you an idea of how dainty you should be with your stitching. So far, so good. And I'm sure you could do all of this machine stitching that I did on here by hand. So all of you are very well versed in hand sewing small garments. A friend of mine who had gone to medical school and supported himself with making wedding gowns found out that he had a much easier time than the rest of the students when it came to learning how to stitch up wounds or incisions, because he was very familiar with sewing two layers together without catching the bottom one. And it's, you know, after you've done it for a long time, it sort of becomes a feel. You can feel when you've hit the bottom layer of fabric. And his fellow students kept saying, how come what are you doing that we can't figure out? And he said, well, because I can feel the layers of skin with my needle. And they were like, what? So it's very interesting. He eventually gave up medicine and went into costuming. But it's a very interesting thing because it's exactly what we do. You can feel when you've entered the danger zone. Good. I didn't go through the wrong side at all. I'm just going to hide my thread inside. Whoop. Spoke too soon. Okay. All right, I'm going to press that. You don't have to wash that. I'm sure you know what that will do. There, nicely done. So the next step is to transfer the little pleat marks on the baboolay pattern. So just lay it out with the centers matching. And with your heat erasable pen, just mark what you see on your pattern. I know a lot of you try your pleating with on a piece of paper first, so that you know what you're doing, which is fine. So, the first marks on either side of your thread tray center will fold in to make a box pleat at the center back. It in place. Here's your other mark, which will go into the center. You just keep folding. Here are the next two marks. That one folds, and it folds on that one. Like that. Next two. And you can see these two touch right there. Then the last two, it's a pretty small one. There. Do the same on this side. And you can see I'm trying to keep the pink from showing on the top as much as possible, so that you don't really see it. Two marks. Okay. Looks fairly the same. Okay. Now, this gets stitched. I'm gonna do this on the machine. About 1/4 of an inch down. It's basically the width of one side of my presser foot on my Elna. And then I'm gonna stitch all the way across. So I'll go do that and be right back. Okay, so I've stitched this together, and I've used it's number 3 on my Elna, because I have done this in smaller stitches and made serious mistakes in my pleating, or they've slipped or something, and so I know better. At least I can take this side stitch out if I have to without destroying the whole baboolay. And my machine doesn't have a reverse really, so I tying these off. Okay. So now we can remove our thread tracing from the center back. Okay, so your baboolay is ready to go on. So with the center back of your hat, you have your center back seam. You are going to match that with the center back of your baboolay, which is where the box pleat meets. And then the rest of it travels along, the stitched area travels along the top of the satin binding until you get to the cheek tabs, and then that angled area of the baboolay gets sewn along that. And I'm ending that right where the brim and the crown meet, right here. Okay. So let's see, how do we do under here? Pretty good. Move this pin out of the way. Yeah, so my stitching is mostly on top of the satin binding. Pin this in this way. Okay, and do the same on the other side. Nice bent pin. Move that up a little. Okay. The little dog leg area is meeting right at the junction. Okay. Let's arrange this a little bit so it's easier to sew. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to sew through the hat into the baboolay and vice versa. And I'm using the double thread. And I'm going to start up here and hide my thread. You're going to have quite an angle with your needle. Let's see if I can get this right. There. You can see it's going at an angle because you want to hit the black seam binding and not the pink lining, because you don't want your stitches to show. Okay. So, going back up at a slant into the stitching line. Into the black binding. Out into, whoops. There. Back up through where I machine stitched. And you're just going to do this all the way around the hat to hold the baboolay in place. And another reason that I use this bias edge binding is because it's so much easier to hide stitches into, especially if you're using a different color or the color's not, you know, the thread doesn't match the lining color. This is a good way to lose a needle too. I've broken many needles trying to get through all of this fabric. Okay, I'm at the center back. Let's see if I can get this needle through. Yep. Okay. Okay, I'm going to finish this and I'll come back and show you how it looks. So this is the last side of the baboolay, which I'm going to sew down. The cheek tabs. You can see why I like these millinery wires, because they bend. Of course, they do sometimes break. Okay, so knot this off right up here. And this is right at that seam. I'm using a single thread here, waxed. Okay. All right, we're sewn together. Your hat's finished, except for the trimming. And I'm gonna give this a little steam. And I like to push these down a little bit so you can see the pink in the inside a little. Okay. There. It's beautiful. Next step will be to make the little bouquets to decorate the hat. So let me get everything set up for that and I'll be right back. So our next step is to make the floral bouquet to trim your hat. And in your kit, you will find a little bundle of flowers. And we're going to go from this to this. And to do that, we have to take them apart. So, you have 2 vintage. Actually, we have 3 vintage. You have a little peach bud, which I don't have any more of, so I won't be using that, but you will. And we have these little forget-me-nots in pink velvet, which are new, and some velvet ribbon, or velvet leaves. So take your wire off your little bouquet and lay everything out, and you'll see, you have to check everything, because I noticed that, like here, the leaves are coming off the stems. So with your grab-it glue, you're gonna repair these. The wire back on. Let that dry. The rest of them, that one's good. This one's loose. So, just prepping everything. Okay. All right. Now, your vintage flowers might need a little steaming. This one looks quite good. There, just to perk them up a little. That looks good. And the little pink velvet flowers you're going to take apart. So you need to cut through this brown floral tape. You don't want to cut all the way through the flowers. You just want to take all of this brown paper tape off this flower. Okay, down to there is good. There's some more up here. Okay, now the important thing is to save this really fine wire that is wrapping and holding these all together, because you're going to use this again. There. Okay. So take the kinks out. Okay, hold on to that. It's important. Let's check on our leaves. Doing well. Okay. So You have these two little pips or stamens and a little cloth leaf section that they were wrapped in. So I want you to take a piece of the stem from one of the leaves, because it's nice and thin, and you're going to cut it. Let's see, I'll measure it. Cut 2.5 inches. Okay. Then I'm going to take your little cloth leaves, put some glue in there. Put the cut wire in there, and then lay the little pips in, or buds. They're going to be buds for us. There. And you want them to stand up, proud of the leaves a little bit, so that you can see them, okay? Then taking your wire that you saved, just wrap it a couple of times to hold it in place. There. Okay. Nice. Now with your leaves, you're going to use 3 of them. And you're going to arrange them something like this. And then this is going to go behind your little pips. Something like this. So continue to wrap the green leaves. Oops, I broke my wire. The velvet leaves in with the little buds. There. Bend them a little bit, give them a little movement. Okay, we're starting. Now, take your little rose, that will be next. And then take your little vintage bunch and tuck that in there. And then you will use all of your little velvet flowers on the other side. There. And then take your wire, connect them all together. Okay. Now, you can rearrange your flowers a little. Bend their little faces out toward you. And there we go. We have a little bouquet. It's gonna go right in here on your hat. Our next step will be to wrap the stems in florist wire, which you will have in your kit on a thread winder. So let me get my tape and I'll be right back. So now we will wrap the stem with the florist wire. Okay, have our florist wire. You'll have this in your kit. And starting up underneath the flowers to hide the wire, you're going to start wrapping this. And the way you do that is you pull and stretch and twist. The florist tape down the stem. I'm not going to use all this stem, so unless you want to, of course. There. There we go. Pull out my little flowers that I crushed a little. There. All right, now we're going to see. We're going to have to turn this, give this a good bend. Because you're going to have it come right up and nestle in the pleats, the pleated header of your baboolay. Okay, it's going to be like that. So let's squeeze this together a little more. Then I'm going to cut this off because I don't need all of this. There. Rewrap that a little. Okay, so everything is facing out. Then you'll have a length of rose, double-sided silk satin ribbon, and you'll have, which is 3/8 inches wide, and you'll have black. Now I've run out of the 3/8, so I'm going to use this, which is a 1/2 inch. And because I'm keeping this mostly black, I'm going to stack these with the rose on the inside like this. And what we're going to do is make a bow to wrap that in. So let's start it off the flowers, approximately halfway. Okay. Slide it on. Let me do this again. This didn't work too well. It's kind of hard doing it for the camera. Okay. Good. Okay. Then we're just going to make a bow. Okay, now, certainly didn't want it that big. And don't forget, you'll have your black ribbon will be much thinner than this one as well. See how that's working. Okay, this needs to be a little smaller. Okay. And you're going to set this right in here. Let me see if I can pin it in so you can see what I'm doing. There. You just need to arrange your flowers. And then this gets sewn right here. Now, of course, yours ribbons won't be so bulky because you need to curve this up against the hat too. And then you sew it down. With double thread. Once again, we're going to use our black satin binding to hide our stitches. Ooh. Surprised me. Okay. Whoops. The bow's coming apart. You're going to want to put a stitch into the knot of your ribbon as well to keep it from opening up again. Okay, good. All right. Now there's a little stitch is a little big on one of these, and you need to be careful of that. Keep them all as small as you can. That off into the ribbon. And there, I'm going to give it a little steaming as soon as my iron heats up. And while that's heating, we're going to talk about the ties. You will have 5/8 black satin ribbon in your kit as well. And I want you to prep them by putting a bead of glue to cut edge, one cut edge on each ribbon. And this is just to keep it from fraying. Let dry. Okay, let those dry. Okay, I think the iron's hot. Nope. Get some of the lint off her hat. Okay, here's some steam coming up. There. Now just keep in mind your knot will be smaller because you'll have a smaller black ribbon. And if you have any of your own flowers that you want to add to it, please feel free. It would make a nice, if you have extras, you could also do a little bunch up under the brim, hiding your stitches in the black satin binding, which would be pretty. You can do anything you want. It would be nice to use any of your own antique trims on these hats too. Okay, let's do the ties. Now the ties on a bonnet are actually bigger, should be a little wider than this, but in the 3 months I tried to find supplies to do this kit, I could not find anybody to sell me an inch or 5/8 inch, well no, inch actually, or 3/4 inch black silk satin grosgrain, which is what I wanted, which would be a better size, but this is what we have, so this is what we're going to use. Okay, not quite dry, but that's okay. Okay, so I want you to measure down 1.5 inches on your ribbon. Put a pin in there. Inch and a half. Okay. Then you're going to bring this down to that mark. Oops. It's okay if the glue is still a little wet. I'll help hold it there. Bring it down to the pin. Okay. Then with a single black wax thread, we're going to gather these little loops together. I used to be able to buy beautiful silk taffeta and grosgrain ribbons at Makuba, but they went out of business in New York City, so I did find a company in Japan, but they never got back to me, so I shall keep pursuing that. So we're going to just gather this up tightly, hold it and knot it. And then just wrap very neatly and tightly a few times with the black thread. You have a nice little finish there. And then knot that off in the back. Okay, it's one. gather this. Tightly. Make a knot. Then we're going to wrap thread tightly and neatly a few times. And then knot this off in the back. Okay, then these get sewn right down here at the end of the cheek tabs. And I would use a double black thread for that, because they will take some tension if you're going to tie these under your doll's chin. Okay, hide my knot in the back. And I want to go pretty much all the way through. And back up through. Okay. And I'm going to go up behind the loop to knot it so we don't see it. Okay. There you go. There, number one. Okay. Hide my knot in the back of the loop. I think this needle will need to be retired after this. Okay, and I'm going to knock this off in the back of the loop. All right, we're finished. Little bonnet for your doll. These are, it's all wired so you can bend it as much as you need to fit. Make sure your shapes are good after all this tugging, pulling. There you are. I hope you have fun. Take your time and enjoy the process. So here you have your finished hat. I hope you've enjoyed the process. I hope you've enjoyed watching the process, and I hope you have fun making this. Just take your time and enjoy each step, and you'll end up with a really beautiful object when you're finished. Thank you. Goodbye.